Today, we're taking a look at the TopSky F7X FPV goggles. Now, most people who are watching this video probably know the story behind these goggles, but to make the story short, the TopSky F7X goggles were announced this past summer with a very impressive set of features at a very reasonable price considering. Because of this, a lot of hype was built on these goggles prior to their release, and in the first release of the goggles they received a lot of criticism, mainly due to the displays used in the goggles, but on other things as well. So TopSky stopped the production, took the feedback to heart, and have just recently released the version 2 of the goggles, which I have here. TopSky have said that they've fixed a lot of the initial problems and improved the ones that can't be fixed entirely. A few reviews of the V2s have come out recently, but I feel like the criticisms have been a little exaggerated, so I'm producing this video to share my opinion on them. Now, I can't comment on the V1s as I did not have a pair, but I can comment on how I perceive the problems in the second version, which is mainly what this video will be focused on. I'm coming from using box goggles to these as an upgrade, so I'll comment on that adjustment as well. First, I just want to say that I do consider these an enormous upgrade to the box goggles I was using. I own a pair of both the eSheen EV800s and the VR008s. I was worried about the field of view difference in moving to the binocular style. However, the field of view in the TopSky is very big. They claim it's 42 degrees, and I find it very similar to that in the smaller box goggles, like the VR008s. It's definitely smaller than the EV800s, but not enough to make a considerable difference. It's still a pretty big display. I've been using these for exclusively 2 weeks now to build a solid opinion, and I haven't run into any real problems with them. So in the first version, there were 7 big problems that people had with the goggles, and they were ghosting with the displays, aftermarket receiver fitment, light leakage, image problems, there was comments about the blurry FPV footage and a rainbow effect with the displays, the DVR, the noisy and powerful fan, and the silicone mask. So this is in order of what I think were the major to minor problems. So let's go through them one by one. So the ghosting. The ghosting in the displays was the biggest complaint from people. Due to how the LCOS screens work, there are internal reflections that can become visible. They are especially noticeable in sharp images with high contrast, like with text on a black background. On the first version, the complaint was that the ghosting was very noticeable and interfered with the FPV footage. However, in the second version, I do not find that I notice it at all. The ghosting is still present, as it can't be removed entirely, and it's definitely noticeable when using the built-in menus in the DVR menu, but it's not a problem during normal flight. The ghosting is minor, and the image is moving so fast that it can't really be seen and doesn't tend to interfere with flying. In regards to aftermarket receivers, fitment of aftermarket receivers caused a lot of criticism in the first version. As the advertising for the goggles focused on the ability to use fatshark receivers, a lot of people expected that to mean all of the aftermarket ones would fit too. However, it was quickly shown that most didn't, and the ones that did fit were clumsy. In the second version, TopSky claims to have made some changes to the module bay to allow most aftermarket receivers to fit. Despite other reviewers saying this isn't the case, there are now some examples showing that many of them do fit, and I'll leave some of these in the video description. Particularly, Furious FPV has started working with TopSky, and they just released a video showing their True D module fitting in the goggles and working fine. I do not currently have a receiver to comment on this, as I'm still waiting to receive mine, but there's more than enough evidence to show that the goggles will fit a lot of the popular aftermarket receivers without modification. And on top of this, TopSky is producing their own diversity modules to accommodate their goggles. They have a screenless diversity module that fits entirely within the module bay and allows you to use all the stock covers. As well, they have a module being produced by RJX Hobby that is based on the RX5808 diversity system that runs open source software. So there'll soon be lots of options for receivers for the TopSkys. With regards to light leakage on the first version was a big problem, as the red body let a lot of light through and into the goggle housing. On the second version, they've changed the material that the goggles are made of, and claim to have made other changes inside to help prevent light leaking. I myself have flown in full sunlight with the black cover off, and there is still some light leaking present. It doesn't seem to come through the body, but it does come in through the seams in the module covers and the hole cut for the microSD card. Personal to me, I have a fairly wide IPD, so I have the sliders set mostly out, and this does prevent a lot of the light from reaching my eyes. However, with a narrow IPD, this could still be a problem for some people. Using the black cover does prevent almost all the light leaks, but it won't be possible to people using aftermarket receivers. There's always the option of cutting the black plastic cover. Maybe TopSky can produce an official one that has a cutout for the aftermarket receivers. Another option that I plan to try is to just install a piece of card into the goggles behind the right module bay. Currently it's wide open directly to the display modules, and this is why the light can get into your vision. Maybe a thin piece of card will block enough light, and TopSky can work this into the production. Now, image problems. Another thing that was commented on a lot with the first version was that the image feed looked terrible and that there was a rainbow or shimmering effect on the screen. In regards to the image quality, there have been a lot of people who have said that replacing the stock module greatly improves the image. TopSky themselves have even said this. That being said, I haven't noticed the image is exceptionally bad. Coming from cheap box goggles, the image is much nicer. For example, with the same quad broadcasting, I can definitely see more detail on thin lines in the TopSkys than on any of my box goggles. Particularly, I can read fine text through the TopSkys that I can't in the box goggles. I think this will make a huge difference when flying around where there are tree limbs and cables, as they'll be easier to see. When I receive my aftermarket receiver, I'll also do a follow-up video addressing this to see for myself. In regards to the rainbow shimmering, this is something that is greatly exaggerated when capturing the screens with a camera. Similar to how filming a CRT monitor shows the image scrolling, or how filming under fluorescent lights can sometimes look like they're flickering, it's an artifact that is captured by the video camera and isn't as perceptible to your own eye. Personally, I don't see any shimmering or rainbow effect in the goggles, not even when moving my eyes around while looking at them. Now this is something that is individual to every person, but I don't think it's as big of a deal as it was made out to be. With the DVR, the first version of the goggles had a definite problem with the DVR recording in both PAL and NTSC. PAL recordings were slow and had a strange blue line on them, and the NTSC recordings didn't work at all. In the V2, this is not a problem anymore. Both record fine, but there is still a slight cropping in the NTSC footage, though TopSky says they have newer firmware to fix this that is currently being tested. I have had no real problems with the DVR. It behaves exactly how I would expect it to, and it's very easy to use even with the goggles on your head. The DVR menu is also very easy to navigate and works quite well. A big plus is that the goggles do save the recording if you unplug the battery without stopping the recording, which is a very easy thing to do, but the resultant video will have some problems being played on a computer. VLC will play it, but the video doesn't get finalized properly, so it gives an error at the end. Not necessarily good news, but it's still better than losing the footage entirely. On top of this, there are a few minor things missing from the DVR. It doesn't record audio, which might be a complaint to some, and there are no fast forward or reverse controls in the playback, which makes using the DVR footage to find a lost quadcopter difficult. However, these are all things that hopefully TopSky can address with a firmware update to the DVR. Now, there were some complaints about how the fan worked in the first version, and TopSky says that they have fixed it. They've made it quieter and less powerful. It's certainly less powerful, and I can wear the goggles with the fan running just fine. However, it's still quite loud, and it gets louder as you use it. I've flown with the fan on just to see how the experience is, but I haven't actually needed to use it. I've flown indoors in warm temperatures and outdoors in cold weather, and the goggles haven't fogged up on me yet. However, I'll have to see if this changes in the summer when the temperature and humidity is much higher. The Silicone Mask. So in the first version, the faceplate that TopSky chose was criticized for falling off too easily and having a silly way to attach the felt to it. In the second version, both have been addressed. The mask holds on very well. I haven't had mine come off. I've even removed it and put it back on to see if it would loosen, but it hasn't. The felt is also now attached with Velcro all the way around, and it stays in place very well and looks much better than the original method with the little Velcro loops. Personally, I find the silicone mask very comfortable. An advantage with this is that it conforms much better to your face than a hard plastic faceplate does. Some customers of the Eachine EV100s couldn't even use their goggles because the faceplate was designed too narrow, so this is a better solution in my opinion. I get absolutely no light leaking from around the silicone mask, and it fits my face very well. I do find, however, that when using the goggles for a long period, the silicone mask can be a little warm. However, this hasn't been a problem for me yet, but I'll have to see how it feels in the summer months. So, as far as I'm concerned, a lot of the big problems have been addressed by TopSky, and they're all perfectly acceptable now. There were a lot of other minor problems that people had with the first version that I didn't think were that big of a deal. Things like not having a voltage display in the goggles. I've gotten a lot of use out of a single charge with the goggles. I've had probably between 2 to 3 hours of on time with the goggles, and the battery indicator only reads half. As well, when the battery is low, the goggles will beep. So with the long battery life and the beeper alarm, I don't think that a voltage display is critical, and there's nothing really lost without it. Comments about the micro SD card being hard to remove. I don't know if this has changed in the V2, but there's now a cutout in the module bay, so it's really easy to get to the SD card, and it's no harder to remove than any other one. There were some complaints about the choice of the toggle switches on top. I think they work great, and I like having independent joysticks for the menus. Having a joystick solely for the DVR operation makes it easier and less frustrating to use. I can quickly start a recording without worrying about triggering a completely separate feature, or getting something in the procedure wrong and not actually starting the recording. About the loose receiver module, I'm not sure what fatsharks do to hold the receiver in, but I wouldn't count on just the headers to hold the receiver in anyway. I used a single piece of double-sided foam tape, which just about everybody has, to hold the receiver in, and it has worked great. The receiver is solid and can be removed if necessary. And finally, the comment about the settings not being saved. This is actually something I would have considered a problem, as it should have been included initially. However, the V2s have fixed this problem. Every setting in the menu is saved, and the channel is saved when power cycling the goggles. When you power them on, the goggles default to AV in, and pressing any channel button returns you to the last channel used. So with all that being said, there are still a few other things that could be improved with the goggles. The channel scan is still very slow, and I can see this being a problem for people at races or who frequently fly with new people. However, you can cycle through the channels fairly quickly on your own, especially if you know what you're looking for. I would like to see the channel designation, not just the frequency, displayed in the goggles as well. The proximity sensor for the screens is very cool, and I do like what it achieves, but it's a potential failure point. It's worked perfectly for me so far, but it just needs to malfunction once to cause a real problem. For that, I think a better solution is necessary, perhaps a small mechanical push button in its place so that screens can be turned off, but aren't prone to false triggers. But in conclusion, I'm very happy with the goggles. The potential in the screens is huge, with the large field of view and the high resolution, and I think they make for a very enjoyable flight experience. I don't feel any sacrifice in coming from box goggles to these. The huge and clear image is fantastic in these goggles, and that's one thing that I think needs to be praised about them. And another thing that I think a lot of people are forgetting is that this is TopSky's first attempt at a proper set of FPV goggles, and they really have delivered quite well. The fact that they took the criticism from the first release seriously and improved the goggles this much in only a few months is certainly worth respecting. A lot of the big companies go through teething pains, just like TopSky has, but they don't catch nearly as much flack for it. The Aomway Commanders had problems with the power lead, which caused blackouts during flight. They also had the SMA jack breaking off internally. The first SkyZone V2 goggles had problems with screen failures, and most recently there was a recall on fatshark Attitude V4s because it had a hardware problem that caused white flashing on the screen. These are all goggles that are currently in the same price category, so it's more fair to compare them. Having major problems in initial releases are not exclusive to TopSky, so I think what is more important is how the company reacts to them. TopSky has, in my book, done a good job of this, both in fixing the problems and in treating the people who bought the first version. So sure, if the goggles are compared to the top-of-the-line fatsharks with the best aftermarket module, they'll come out behind, but you'll also need to spend twice the amount of money to get there. These goggles are pretty much at the bottom end of the pricing for binocular goggles, and I think they offer a lot for that price. Overall, I'm extremely happy with mine, and I don't have any problems that make me regret choosing them. When I receive an aftermarket module, I'll do a comparison between it and the stock module to see if the improvements are as good as everybody has claimed. If you like this video and you look forward to the updates, please consider subscribing to help me out. Thanks for watching.